welcome back to the channel and welcome back to Bookmas. We're getting to the time of the year now, we're wrapping up the end of the year. So I've been looking at the books that I've read this year and kind of figuring out what my faves and my least faves of the year, or my flops of the year. Now, when compiling my faves list, I found that quite easy to pick out the top 10 to figure out what I wanted. And I did make a top 10 list for my flops. However, the books 6 to 10 were not books that I necessarily, well, I didn't enjoy them, but they weren't bad books. I think they just weren't books for me. So I decided instead to just kind of concentrate on the top 5s when talking about my least faves of the year. These are ones that I did have some kind of issues with in terms of stories. These are ones I didn't like as much and left a kind of more profound negative effect on me, instead of kind of just trying to come up with 10 for the sake of having 10. We're going to just do 5 instead. Starting with my dishonorable mention, which is actually a book that I have read in December. I've got a little vlog that I'm doing that will I kind of have my thoughts in a bit more detail, but that is Murder Under the Mistletoe by Reverend Richard Coles. This is a novella. This is like a 3.5 in his series. Granted, I have not read the rest of the series. However, it was advertised that it could be kind of read as a standalone, and for the most part it can be. Like, I was able to understand basically who everyone was and kind of what was going on. It just wasn't the best. I found his writing style very rambly and kind of somewhat incoherent. It kind of like felt like in a lot more full stops needed to be used throughout the text. A lot of the sentences kind of ran on and on and on. I'd give examples in my vlog that's coming out. Really wasn't for me. The murder in this cozy mystery didn't end up happening until 80% of the way through, and it was instead focused a lot more on like the Christmas side of it, which is fine for a Christmas, I guess, novella, but yeah, it just wasn't for me. So I got a little bit of a dishonorable mention for the month. But starting with 5, going from 5 being the most least liked to 1 being the least liked, if that makes sense. So at number 5, I had the book that I also think I've spoken about, I think in my most recent wrap up, and that is The True Queen by, I want to say, Alison Weir, I think. This is a historical fiction book that tells the story of Catherine of Aragon, Henry VIII's first wife. It is a big book. It is quite dry. It's written by a historian and it kind of feels very historical texty. I didn't really like the way that the author had written Catherine's kind of character, how she came across, and just in general the writing, it was just very like heavy. There was a lot put into it. It just wasn't for me. I do like historical fiction, but this was kind of the first kind of the one that I've really read following an actual historical figure, and not like a kind of retelling of her story, more a telling of her story, but just from this person's perspective. It didn't take like a fantastical route, or it didn't take like a different element. It kind of went through exactly what Catherine of Aragon went through. It just did not in a very interesting or compelling way for me personally. This does seem to be a bit of an outlier opinion. Like, this is where sometimes I feel like ratings, especially on like Goodreads, are not always predictable of what you are going to think of a book. So please take everything that I say in this for any of these books with like a great pinch of salt, because although they don't work for me, they absolutely could work for you, because this one has quite a high ratings on Goodreads, but for me it was an absolute miss. I didn't really enjoy it, but yeah, I think I did speak a bit more about it in a different video. Overall, I found it a bit boring and a bit dry and a bit long, very long actually. So book number 4, I'm not sure I've spoken about this on my channel, and that is Good Girl Complex by Elle Kennedy. This is technically it's the first in a duology. I'm not going to continue it, but it's a standalone story in of itself about a young girl going off to university, and she has a boyfriend, and it's dual POV from another guy's perspective. And in the first kind of chapter, he gets kind of fired because he pisses off this rich guy. This rich guy happens to be our main female character's boyfriend, and so our main character basically decides that he is going to break up their relationship to kind of get revenge on the rich guy. My main issues with this story was that it was very predictable. Literally everything that I thought was going to happen kind of happened. It played out exactly the way that I thought it was going to, in terms of the miscommunication, the third act breakup, and how they eventually came back together. Like, it all played out exactly how I was expecting it to. My biggest kind of gripe with this book is kind of how it somewhat tries to justify cheating. Cheating for me is like a massive anti-buzzword, especially with main characters, but like, our main character is in a relationship for a good portion of this book, but she still engages, although not in necessarily a completely cheating relationship, it's kind of borderline cheating. And although that's kind of justified, I think in the book it tries to justify it because we know that her boyfriend's an asshole because of the guy's perspective, and the guy knows the boyfriend's an asshole, but she doesn't know this. So yeah, it kind of how for me felt it was trying to justify cheating in that sense. So that is just for me just an absolute no. I did end up finishing the book. I ended up listening to it just to kind of finish it. I should have DNF'd it. It really wasn't for me. Again though, this could be something other people really enjoy. I can't quite remember the ratings on it. It just was very unpredictable. No, it was very predictable. Sorry, not unpredictable. It was very predictable, and yeah, it just didn't add anything for me. I have read romances that I have really enjoyed, and this was not one of them. So yeah, I'm hesitant to try anything else by Elle Kennedy as well, just because the writing didn't really stand out for me in any way, shape or form. This was a college romance, so maybe college romances aren't for me, which could definitely be the case. place. Book number 3 is Murder. This is by Sarah Pinbrough, and it's actually the sequel to a book called Mayhem. Mayhem was just an okay book for me. I did relatively enjoy it. The story is set around the time of Jack the Ripper, and there is murders happen that are getting attributed to Jack the Ripper, but it's kind of happening alongside it, and there's something potentially supernatural going on with those extra murders. Now, for Mayhem, that book got wrapped up. The mystery got solved, the murders got figured out, all of that, and our characters had their end conclusion. Murder kind of took everything from the first book, longed out the story in a completely unnecessary way, and in my opinion, shat on everything that happened relatively positive from the first book. Like, some of the stuff that happened in this second book, I was actually quite upset about because, like, it felt so unnecessary. I'm obviously not going to go into any kind of specifics because it would be a spoiler. Like, I would recommend the first book. I found it relatively compelling and interesting. I would not recommend the second book. It added in an unnecessary, in my opinion, love triangle that I hated. It took our main character and really just kind of turned all of his morals around a bit. Like, kind of, it had reasons for it, but it kind of, the way it twisted his character, I just really didn't enjoy. And it just kind of like rehashed a little bit of the first kind of plot line in the second book, but the first book had wrapped it up. So yeah, this was an unnecessary sequel. It was one that I wasn't necessarily even going to read, and I wish I hadn't read, because, like, for me, I was like, oh, this is a done story, why would I carry on with it? But it was on Everand, so I just listened to it, and I wish I hadn't. A lot of the times with books that I should have DNF'd are usually ones that I'm listening to on audiobook, and at the time I was working nights, and so would listen to audiobooks at nighttime. So for me, I would push myself through to listen to all of the audiobook, even if I wasn't liking it, because I was working. So it's not like it was going out of my way. I don't think I would do that now, not working nights, and I can't listen to audiobooks at work. So, like, it would be actually taking something out of my time to do that. But I think because of that, the next one, as well as these last two, were all audiobooks that I finished while at work, which also potentially could have contributed to the dislike of them, although I don't think so. I think it was more of the story. So book number 2 is How to Kill Your Family. I think that's what it's called, by Becca Mack, I'm pretty sure. Ooh, this book, man. This was a book club book that we had as part of my family book club, and I think all of us didn't end up liking it. I don't know if it's presented as a thriller or like a kind of, yeah, like as a thriller, but it definitely reads more literary fiction. So if you are more literary fiction leaning, you might enjoy it. However, this is the most obnoxious main character I've ever read from. She was incredibly unlikable. She was so stuck up, so prejudiced to literally everyone. If you were fat, if you were skinny, if you wore a lot of makeup, if you got filler, she was like ragging on guys for having extremely hairy backs. She was ragging on everyone. She saw herself as such a kind of highbrow person, and she was just a dickhead. And so, like, I didn't like following her story anyway, but then, like, the whole idea is that she is killing her family. You're told from the very first chapter kind of the outcome of this story, so there's no mystery in it, which I'm never like always that compelled with when it does that, because there's no mystery. You know how this character is eventually going to end up. It would go through these different murders, but it would make it like it was boring, some of them, and like one of the murders felt very unnecessary. Like, the guy felt unnecessary to kill him, so then that also didn't really make me appreciate her. There's an almost pseudo incesty scene in one of these chapters as well, with her uncle, who she knows is her uncle. They don't actually touch each other, but they're in a sexual situation together. Gross. There's a scene where she definitely, like, kind of is predatory to like a 15-year-old boy to get him to help her do this murder. So there's like crimes outside of the murders that are happening. She thinks she's completely justified and in the right for all of this stuff, and I'm not in my head quite sure, or even if she knew, how she was going to end up getting the money, because essentially she is from, her father is an extremely rich man, but she is a product of an affair, so she has nothing to do with her father's family. She decides that she is going to kill them all off and inherit the money, but like, she's not entitled to that money anyway, and I'm sure her dad has got a pretty airtight will. There is a massive POV switch towards the end of this book that literally was probably the worst thing that I think could have happened to this book. Like, before that, the book, I wasn't enjoying it. I didn't like the main character, but some of the deaths were interesting, and so like I was like, okay, you know what, this is fine. But that POV switch, man, killed this book for me. I thought it was absolute shite. I really did enjoy this book, and I really wouldn't recommend it, but like, if you are more into a literary fiction kind of vibe, this might be your style. And I know some people have liked it, but not me. My mum and my older sister didn't enjoy it. My twin sister, I think, was the one that enjoyed it the most, but she enjoys literary fiction the most out of all 4 of us. So yeah, it was a kind of not a great book for the book club, and made it to number 2, and it stuck with me, and has definitely left it so that I will not be reading anything else by this author. And then the last book, the book which is my least favourite of the year, is a book that I have spoken about very recently, and that is Girls in Tears by Jacqueline Wilson. This is a middle grade book. It's a contemporary middle grade story about a group of 14-year-old girls that are friends. This is the 4th in a series and the final in a series. And my main main issues with this isn't actually really, like, I think sometimes you have, this book was written about 20-ish years ago, so I definitely have to take that in perspective of like the time frame it's written in. And so like, I don't actually think the writing is necessarily bad. My main issues with this is how our main character is treated by her so-called friends. I'm gonna kind of go into spoilers for the sake of this section, so if you are ever interested in reading it, like, click off. But essentially in this book, she has a boyfriend and her friends really don't pay interest in her having this boyfriend. They really, I think they are jealous of her because she is presented as being the kind of ugly fat friend. That's kind of how she's always spoken about. That's how she thinks of herself as well. And they kind of are always a bit shitty about her, hanging out with her boyfriend, spending time with her boyfriend, any of that. So anyway, they go to a party one night and she ends up getting quite drunk. She comes out and her best friend is making out with her boyfriend. I tell you now, I felt so sick. Like I mentioned before, cheating is a huge anti-buzzword for me. I felt so sick for her because obviously she was devastated by this. And it ends up being, though, that her other friend kind of sticks with the other friend and acting like she's out of order for not hearing her friend out for doing this. Her other friend also ends up in this book saying, that wouldn't look good on you because you're too fat. When in book 3 in this series, our main character Ellie struggles with a restrictive ED, which was handled terribly, and I really wouldn't recommend it for anyone that does struggle with an ED to read that book because the way it's spoken about is awful. And she still speaks to her like this. And then in the end, they make up at the end of the book. And she also implies that she's going to get back with her boyfriend, which is whatever. But like, we're talking about the girls here. And like, I feel like it was presented like this is just what girls do. And it just really is not. Like, these were not good friends to her, and I actually really felt for her that she deserved so much better friends than she got in these books. There is an adult sequel, and in the adult sequel, both of the actual her friends seem to have grown up to be shitty characters. One of her friends is in an affair. So I just didn't enjoy it. And obviously I am well out of the age range for this book. I am a adult man. This is aimed for teenage girls, but I still think I can objectively look at this book and be like, actually, her friends suck. Because also, like, I think they have sucked for most of the books. I think sometimes they're out of order to her. They get in fights, they bicker and whatnot. But like the first 3 books in the series, I didn't hate. They were fine, and they were held a ever so hint of nostalgia for me for the time setting it's in. But yeah, it just really upset me for her as a character. I wasn't happy about it, and it really upset me. And like, when a book has such a visceral effect on making me feel ill for a character that doesn't exist, about a book series that was written 20 years ago, yeah, it's going to definitely get in my least favourite. It's my least favourite of the year. It's the one that stuck with me because I think I read it in like June or August or something, but it stuck with me. I really didn't enjoy it. It really made me feel sick. It really made me feel upset. And I think her friends suck. So yeah, those are my top 5 least favourite books of the year. I really actually haven't read that many disappointing reads, to be honest, this year. I have started DNFing more, so that is also potentially why. I feel like I probably could make a list of like top meh books of the year. So books that I didn't necessarily dislike, but also I didn't really like. They were just like nothing burgers. Maybe I should do that. I might do that in the beginning of January. But for a least faves of the year, this were my top 5, as well as my dishonorable mention. In a couple of days, I will be putting up my top faves, which I will have 10 for. We are on the downward run now to the end of Bookmas. I will admit I'm getting ever so slightly burnt out. I'm filming this literally the day before it goes up, so I've out of pre-planned, pre-edited videos. So yeah, but I have been really enjoying it, and I thank you guys so much for anyone that has watched even just one of them. I really appreciate it. If you've made it this far, leave me the little drop emoji, teardrop emoji for girls in tears, because that is definitely how I felt reading this book. Didn't enjoy it. I'll see you again in a couple more days for more Bookmas. Bye.